It's time for the boss of the Spina di Rosula to step up to the plate and revitalize people's interest in the most forgettable element of Genshin Impact, Geo. It's been a solid, very long, almost 2 years since we last saw our new Geo unit grace our banner screens. If you don't remember, our last Geo unit was Yunjin, who made her debut back around the 2022 Lantern Rite Festival. Since then, it's been a pretty rocky road for Geo. With Dendra's release and the lack of representation for the element, Geo didn't have much impact within our ever-shifting teams. Now with Fontaine, we have been granted the gift of not just one Geo unit with Navia, but potentially another unit with Chiori, who finally made her on-screen debut this same patch. With much excitement for these anticipated units, there has been also equal amounts of speculation and worry regarding their value. With Navia's release, we will take a quick look at how she keeps up in our current roster and how she compares to our Geo compatriots, as well as discussing the state of Geo and their units moving forward. This is Taiso Games and welcome back to our channel. By now, it's absolutely no surprise to anyone that Navia hits like an absolute truck. Nothing is more satisfying than sucking up those crystallized shards and obliterating the enemy within seconds. Her introduction to the roster has been really refreshing so far. Considering the state of Geo, it's no surprise that they made Navia so strong. If they wanted her to be of any real use to players, she needed those high numbers for people to even consider pulling for her. While she could have been just an okay unit, most people would simply have disregarded her. Her easy to understand kit paired with her sheer strength is comparable to a rather recent fan favorite, Nouvelette. While yeah, he is still the stronger unit, that's not debatable. They both have characteristics of a well-designed, engageable kit. They did the right thing with her, that's for sure. Unlike the Geo companion she's compared to the most, Itto, Navia skills off of attack rather than defense, giving her access to the best, most overused buffer in the game, Bennett. But honestly, most importantly, it gives her access to more easily accessible weapons and artifact sets, and more diverse team compositions. That's largely in fact to her own passive though, however. A grievance that some have with Itto is that he wants Goro in his team and Goro wants 2 other Geo units, hence the ever so infamous mono Geo team. Goro provides a quite significant defense buff, which Navia doesn't want. And while yes, he does give a 15% Geo damage bonus, it's not significant enough to justify his use. Had Navia not been granted the ability to absorb the crystals around her with her Hold E, we could have seen the use of Goro potentially, as his burst pulls in shards towards the active character every 1.5 seconds. But alas, that functionality isn't necessary. Aside from Itto, the other members of the Geo team are not as comparable as they take up different roles. Zhongli, for instance, takes up the crown as our undisputed shield champion. While yes, he can do decent damage with the right build, and he did have a physical damage phase when he was a new unit, this still isn't super similar to Navia. Now, taking in an aspect of Geo that has been largely unutilized, that being crystallized, and having a character revolve around it is a very good design and definitely a step in the right direction for Geo. Crystallized as a whole has been neglected outside from the archaic Petra set, which most players already have their own gripes with. Remove the artifact and there's nothing else with this reaction provided that is significant enough to remote using. The shield is nice and everything, but it's nothing to write home about. Navia changes this with her good kit design. While I do think this kit or something like it should have been introduced a couple years ago, it's nice to see them introduce it now. I think a lot of people were extremely excited, but understandably wary, afraid that she would underperform or be another member of the mono Geo assembly. I've seen people expecting Navia to completely revolutionize Geo or crystallize, and I honestly don't think that would be good for the game. To have so much focus on this one unit to carry an element on their back is, in my opinion, bad game design. You have to pull a 5-star character in order to make a good version of Geo playable. This would be an absolute nightmare. Every character that would follow would have to then either power creep them or fit into their team. If you miss the character, well, you're out of luck, and now your only access to this new Geo reaction or best Geo option is now gone until the next rerun. The better course of action, in my opinion, would be to have units like Navia that build off pre-existing elements of Geo, while Hoyo also buffs the element on the side. Like having a unit explode crystallize akin to Nilu Bloom, or having a unit heal and causing that overhealing to turn into a Geo shield, or something along those lines. Have units build off what we already have, make it interesting. And sure, Navia's focus around vacuuming shards to turn it into a devastating cannon isn't the peak of game design innovation, but it sure as hell is a good concept, and more importantly, it's a lot of fun. If Hoyo were to buff Geo, they could leave those changes to the element as a whole, not making these buffs tied to specific units. Relying on specific units to make a Geo element good is not fixing the issue at hand. In my opinion, it makes it worse. On the more extreme end, I know there are some that wanted Hoyo to completely rework Geo and give them reactions with other elements, but let's be completely honest here, that will never happen. Well, you may be asking yourself, why not? Hoyo makes millions and millions of dollars, how could they not? Well, the problem here isn't money, it's resources, it's people. There simply aren't enough people to possibly undertake these kinds of changes in the time span that people would want them. Also, I don't think people understand the time that it takes to make all this content that we get. By no means am I a Hoya bootlicker. There's so much that I want them to change and they still haven't done it. But I graduated with a bachelor's degree in game design, so at the very least I like to think I have some understanding of how game development works. And genuinely, the amount of content that we get for this game is absurd. Even if it doesn't feel like it, or even if you don't like all the aspects of the content. I'm looking at you, Genius Invocation TCG. I'm looking at you. We get something new every 3 weeks. New units, new events, sometimes a whole new area, and new quests. Aside from a game like Fortnite, I can't think of another game that provides so much content at this scale, this fast. The reason I say all this is because I am certain that the Genshin dev team has at the very least a whole year's worth of content thoroughly planned out, with most of that already in the works. Of course, I'm sure that they have enough wiggle room to change smaller things like units, kits, numbers, etc. So unless they have already set things in motion for a Geo Rework, I honestly don't think it's happening anytime soon, or at all. And if they wanted to, due to high demand in the community, they'd have to restructure a lot, and oh, I mean a lot. And let's please be real here, everyone. We have been begging for a resin increase for the past 3 years now, and we still haven't seen that. Just this patch, we finally got the ability to fully send out our expedition units again with a click of a button. A complete rework of a Geo element would take a very long time. Let's leave such wishes for a Genshin Part 2, or something like whatever they're doing over there at Honkai Impact. Even then, keep expectations really low, my friends. It keeps you happy. And if they were to delay patches for a rework, we've seen parts of this community absolutely crumble when Hoyo announces that they have to delay patches due to very, very reasonable cultural circumstances. Now just imagine announcing that something needs to be cut out or restructured in order to properly introduce a Geo Rework. Let's just say that things wouldn't go over well with the vocal fold. Listen, as someone who plays so many games, Epic 7, Warframe, Pokemon, League, etc., people don't take change very well, even if that change is for the better. There will always be people who like something how it was before. It's just how these things go. This doesn't even take into account the changes to characters, weapons, artifacts, etc. that would need to happen in order to even introduce a Geo Rework or a new Geo-based elemental reaction system. I don't even know if they would be able to legally change limited units kits to account for such drastic changes, considering that people have already spent hundreds or even thousands to get their Ito or their Zhongli. To end this whole rambling section off, this whole Geo Rework concept that some want is very complex and nuanced and would simply be too difficult to implement at this point in the game. A more realistic approach would be to have future units like Navia that build off of what Geo already has. As some of you may have seen, Chiori is a Geo unit, and that means that we should be receiving another Geo character before the end of Fontaine. If she is another 5-star limited unit, let's hope she follows Navia's footsteps and happens to be a very solid character. She may be released after Shenyan and Gaming's patches. Personally, I'm hoping that she's our first 5-star Geo healer that can easily be slotted into Navia teams or Farina teams or just build her own niche. We really have to wait and see how she's handled to more clearly understand what route the Genshin dev team is going to take when it comes to this underperforming element. So far so good, let's hope that Navia has set the precedent for what a good Geo unit should be. It seems like we could finally be moving out of this Geo slump that we've had for the past couple of years. While no, I don't think Navia is revolutionary by any means, I do think the community is coming around to kits that don't necessarily rely on reactions in order to prove useful. I think players' expectations need to be realistic when it comes to new and upcoming units, especially when it comes to Geo. And for the most part, it seems like people are quite pleased with the outcome this time around. If you want to see more content like this, or want to see our future projects, then leave a like, subscribe, and turn on the bell to stay updated. This is Taiso Games, thank you for watching, and we'll catch you next time.